Roll call. Thank you. All right.
Yo.
Vinnie Taranto.
Here.
John Windsor.
Here.
Terry Casto. Here. David Lane.
Here.
Karen McLaughlin.
Here.
Stephanie Ely.
Here.
John Durkee.
Here.
Courtney Barker. Unexpected. Todd Swingle.
Here.
Jean Artusa has asked to be excused. Danielle Bowden.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you so much. I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
Did I do the pledge?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not on my list. Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, now I will entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
I second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'll also entertain a motion for approval of the minutes as presented. I need a motion first.
I'll move.
Okay. And we have a second? Any discussion? Any additions? Corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Virginia.
All right. Morning. It's been a busy month. I'm doing a lot of time on the septic ordinance. And so,
Virginia, can you speak up?
Mike.
there you go. Is that better? Yes. A lot of work on the septic ordinance and the science behind why the overlay area, or defining the overlay area that is proposed in that ordinance. And there are public hearings listed in the staff report. That item's going to the County Commission for the first public hearing on Tuesday, and then the second and hopefully last public hearing on October 9th. Brevard Zoo completed their first oyster reef funded through this competitive substitute project process, the Wanielista Oyster Reef. Marine Resources Council completed their second living shoreline project, one at the Lagoon House. We've contracted with the University of Central Florida to do the performance monitoring of both the oyster living shoreline projects and the planted shoreline projects, and so they're ready to get out there and start documenting the performance of those projects a few weeks after installation, and then 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year. So we'll see how that changes over time. Muck Finders has completed mapping of muck in Mullet Creek and the Sykes Creek Phase 2 areas. We're going to send you maps for Mullet Creek. It's very interesting to see how the muck is accumulated in some areas, and then some of the flats are fairly clean. So we'll email that to you shortly. The little vacuum head experiment that we did at the end of the Turkey Creek FEMA cleanout project, the FIT folks analyzed the sediment left, after that vacuum head experiment, and the organics were reduced, so that was successful. We're kind of struggling to figure out the economics of it, though, because we don't have good volumetric quantification for changes that are the scale that occurred there. The performance table and process timeline were updated. If you have any questions about those updates, Brandon's here.
You're talking the colored
Yes, the green, mostly green and some yellow.
We added in your suggestions from last time, so we updated with the percentage paid for the projects that have been partially paid. So that's listed on there.
The concern that came up last time is that we may have that second column in the wrong fiscal years.
Yep, we fixed that as well, yep.
You tackled that?
Yep.
Excellent.
Well, we listed the fiscal years in there, so, if you have a better way to tackle it.
Well, I'm just curious what happens when we trip over on the 1st of October and now these all turn red, and yet there's nothing wrong with the process and there's nothing to be done to fix it. That's really an issue.
Right, so they won't trip to red unless they are older. If they submitted project applications to be effective October 1st, then they won't go to red.
Well, I guess the point is we're really dealing with two sets of fiscal years. One is the counties and one is the grant recipients. And I think, not as a general statement, but as an aspect of this, it might be the case often that money that's booked in your fiscal year may be booked a fiscal year later at these other places. And since red and yellow are not positive colors in this, I think of respect to the grant recipients, you need to figure out how to do that. Maybe you put a slant sign in and it's yellow on your side and green on theirs or something, but from the municipality and other grant receivers' viewpoint, I think that's a wrinkle that we ought to sort out, because this is an extraordinarily useful thing to have. It ought to have full truth rather than truth just from the county's viewpoint.
And if I could jump in there just for a second. Are there any that are shown here now with dates that are going to flip to red on October 1st? And I don't think there are. I think these will be at least a year off before they would flip to red.
Yeah.
Okay. That'll help.
So there's nothing that's going to change on October 1st on this table. Thanks.
Can you remind me what that signifies?
The blue is just ones that were a couple years out.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
So on the work underway, we will be using the tools that were developed for the septic ordinance to go through the plan and look at how the prioritization that we did in the plan for septic to sewer and septic upgrades may be refined with this new information. We sent you an email about MIMS muck dredging resuming, so that project is back underway. Cocoa Beach, and Wayne's here, is 40% complete. That project's moving along nicely. Sykes Creek muck dredging, we're working on a design scope for Phase 1 that would use the Kiwanis Island spoil site. I met yesterday with the engineers for Florida Inland Navigation District about using their site for the larger Phase 2 project. So we're working through those issues. The muck dredging master permit, we have seagrass and bathymetric survey work going on for multiple projects up in the Titusville area, at least 4 different old borrow pit sites adjacent to causeways there. The Grand Canal muck dredging, the County Commission approved the temporary use authorization for the dredge material management area for that project on Tuesday. So we'll now, at their very next meeting, October 9th, we'll bring forward the permission to advertise that project for construction. The Mathers Bridge area, there was less muck found in the original search area than we anticipated, so we're expanding that search beyond the original search area. Palm Bay North Regional Water Reclamation Facility, that's one of the upgrade of the reclaimed water quality projects. Their design is well underway now. We've received a second invoice from them this week. Titusville has 2 stormwater projects that are in 90% design. They have a 3rd stormwater project that is in the procurement process, so hopefully we'll have a contract awarded. They will have a contract awarded to get that one under construction shortly. Sykes Creek, Zones M and T, we have field work, surveying in progress there. Sykes N, we've received the 90% design and returned that back to the engineer for, small modifications, and so we're looking forward to getting that one out to bid for construction as well. South Central C, the Homeowners Association has approved the location of lift stations, so we can now proceed with design around those lift station locations. For the homeowner costs for both septic to sewer projects and septic upgrades, we have this great funding available to reimburse folks, but we need a process for many of those people to have the dollars to do those projects in the first place. And so we've been looking at how to front the money. There was an interesting talk at the Florida Solar Energy Center about some loan programs that are available, sort of microloan programs that are available. I was contacted by the state of Florida this week. They're also looking at a way to provide low-interest loans, and so we're having various discussions about, how they could lower the points on those initial fees and points with the loan and allow for early payoff so that we have a good mechanism for getting dollars into people's hands to pay the contractor to get the work done, and then we can reimburse them immediately after the work is completed. The Kingsmill Aurora Stormwater Project is a very large county stormwater project, and we have a land purchase that is moving forward to provide treatment for that watershed. Our grass clipping outreach study is underway. Surveys have been posted on social media and under collection here for a little over a week now, and so I think we'll be getting some good feedback on what current practices are and beliefs are and what it is that we need to change.
Virginia?
Yes.
Yeah, on grass clippings, because we're obviously talking to a lot of the homeowners, have we talked to the county about what their best practices are? It's difficult for me to talk to my neighbors when we drive down the road and we see the county crews or the state crews cutting and just leaving everything that we know washes directly into the river.
And that was an issue in Alachua County as well, one of the first counties to tackle this. So yes, I fully expect that to be a part of the program, is working with both county crews and the municipal crews on leading by example.
Well, the commercial crews too.
Yes, the commercial crews have to, someone from the crew has to be trained in best management practices, and that best management practice course includes information and requirements on grass clippings, but we need to reinforce that a whole lot more in addition to...
I need a white flag when I stop and point out to them that they really should be blowing the clippings in the grass, and sometimes I get a friendly response and sometimes I don't.
It raises a broader question. There's several elements of county government, different departments that are involved with stuff that affects the lagoon. And mostly, except for you guys, it affects it in a negative way. Is there within county government, Brevard County, an internal organization that meets periodically to deal with lagoon issues? Or is it just one-off when it comes up? Well, I've got a recommendation to you and Frank Abadi. Form one. Form one. And please report back next time.
Well, we have this little break in your list. We skipped over the Church Street baffle box, Virginia. So that's under review in that the city has responded.
We just got the contracts we received from the city. It's been reviewed by the county. It's going up for signatures today.
Okay.
And we'll be
Okay,
going to the
fine.
city as soon as we get those signatures.
And the homeowner grant program, just for everybody in the audience, was the Solar and Energy Loan Fund. Yes.
Thank you. So skipping to the bottom of the page, and I know you had a speaker at your last meeting that asked about the PFOS, PFOA, PFAS, the perfluorinated and polyfluorinated substances that are polluting our groundwater under the Air Force bases and the potential concern that that may be moving off base. The county and the city of Satellite Beach, I don't know what others, Cocoa Beach, have adopted resolutions requesting state assistance dealing with that issue. We've had multiple conference calls with state agencies. We're going to meet with them in the Orlando Central District office next week. We have a scope of work underway to collect samples in the muck in the Grand Canal, the water in the Grand Canal, water in the Banana River, three samples distributed along the Banana River, 3 samples in the Indian River, north, central, and south. Irrigation wells, shallow and deep irrigation wells north and south of Patrick Air Force Base, and on the mainland to get an idea of background levels for our community.
Does the Air Force partake in this?
The Air Force has been in multiple meetings.
Local Air Force, though?
Local Air Force,
Okay.
yes.
There's an Assistant Secretary of the Air Force who deals with this stuff. And I suspect they have remediation money. Unless your local Air Force cat who goes to the meetings is wired to the Pentagon and the Air Staff, you're talking to people that don't have money. And if they go seek money from the 45th Space Wing, they end up going through Colorado Springs, and they get in this civil engineers rack and stack program. And even if you're standing there with money in your hand, it'll take them 5 years to spend it. I think there should be some consideration of an outreach to the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force who deals with environmental matters, and the 45th Space Wing should be able to help you to do that. If they push back, that's a suggestion that they're trying to stay away from the air staff.
Thank you. And then September 30th is the end of our fiscal year, so we're very busy with end of the year fiscal closeout, trying to set ourselves up for starting the beginning of the new fiscal year. We've been working with the auditors on providing copies, a subsample of all sorts of documents in different phases of allocating and assigning and spending the dollars. So flipping to the back side of the sheet, this is National Estuaries Week. And Florida Institute of Technology has got their TechCon event this Friday, if anyone is interested in registering for that. The See a Difference Day, you had Missy Weiss come and present to you 2 meetings back. That's going to occur on October 4th with the Day in the Life at the Indian River Lagoon, with thousands of students out sampling, collecting data in the lagoon. And then the Shore Symposium, Sharing Our Research with Everyone Symposium at Daytona State College. It's coming up on November 30th. Their keynote speaker this year is going to be Marcus Erickson, who is co-founder of the 5 Gyres Institute. And they've looked at the global distribution and impact of plastic pollution in the oceans, and estimated 270,000 metric tons of floating plastic in the ocean. So I'm sure he will be a very interesting keynote speaker. And that's a full day of research by mostly student presentations, but it's always interesting to see what folks are interested in about lagoon research these days. For next month's meeting, I wanted to bring back the septic ordinance work, the research that we've been doing with applied ecology, and talk about how that applies to the next update of the plan. We had also talked about having Dr. Duane De Freese and Dr. Gary Zarillo come give the presentation on circulation enhancement from Dr. Zarillo's modeling. I spoke to the port yesterday, and that they have kicked that to their next meeting, so They asked that we not do that next month, that we delay it another month. So we will work on your agenda. I don't really have a full Plan B yet, but we'll get there.
So, Virginia, real quick, so we were supposed to talk about that, I think, originally like 2 months ago or something? And then now we're going to push it back 2 more months?
Right, so the contractor was later completing the work than anticipated, and then the port reviewed the work and asked for significant modifications to how the data was presented. And so they've been going back and forth on the meaning of that data and how to present it in a meaningful way for lay audience. And so the latest version of that arrived at the port yesterday, and the deadline for the next port meeting was too quickly coming up, so it needs to wait another month.
Okay. Thank you.
So moving on to the, yes, sorry.
Well, I just want to make comments, work underway. I want three things. One is kudos to the staff. I know John is frustrated by the pace of activity, and I think Lou made the comment about it's unfortunate there's so many negative things happening that are giving the Lagoon justifiably bad press right now, but there really is an amazing amount of stuff going on, and it's just sort of hard to communicate that and the somewhat optimistic wishes we have for the outcome of this stuff. So a lot more to do. We all know that, and vote. It's important, but kudos to the staff. Second thing, on the Merritt Island site, I thought a couple months ago, 3 months ago, we had a homeowner. There was some discussion about the muck remediation, DMMS being moved to a wetlands or something. Is this back to the original plan? No. Or is this the same project? The Kiwanis Island muck pit.
The way the project was originally designed and bid, contractors had the option of using Kiwanis Island
Right.
and designing a berm system on that island, or proposing an alternative site.
Right.
And the low bid proposed an alternative site, and that alternative site was not appropriate for the community, and those bids were rejected. The board asked us, directed staff to look at going back to trying to do a phase one on the island, with the county designing how that island, what the berms would look like on that island, and then working with Florida Inland Navigation District on getting their site designed in such a way that it would be appropriate for a bigger project,
So we saved the wetlands.
phase two.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. This is the third and final thing. I've made this point before, and God forbid, I don't want to add bookkeeping, nonsense, but I have this dream that there's a master register someplace that's got a unique index number for every project that we've considered and, put aside or funded or it's in progress or whatever. And it would help a lot if, in fact, there was such a master register. I haven't found it. And if we could go, when we have a list like this, it is very difficult to go to homeowner grant program, blah, 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 and figure out which one of the 150 or 300 things we've looked at. So, I'm not trying to make more work that's not needed, but I think it would help a lot to just track these things with this unique index number. That's all. Thank you.
If I could, one, that'd be a pretty good project for the contract wrangler I keep telling you need to hire for the empty slot you have. And secondly, I'm not frustrated by the time it takes to do this. I share your view that this is extraordinary, good performance by the county across the board. And that's not just Department of Natural Resources. The money side is in the game too. The legal side is clearly part of it as well. The concern, not a frustration, but a concern, is the inability to communicate to the general public that this stuff really does take a long time to get there. Last math I did, looking at this, we've booked pretty close to $70 million. We've spent about $3 million. We've been at this game for almost 2 years. That's the way it is, and that's not the lag in spending is not an indication of issues or problems or anything else. It's simply a statement about how money is spent in governmental bodies and what oversight requires and what the law requires, and what regulation requires, and so on. So I absolutely share kudos, and we've got a communication problem to the public to make them understand that this 10-year thing has got about a 1.5 to 2 year lag before the 10 years worth drops in place.
Yeah, John, and I'd just be a little careful not to lay it all on the government bureaucracy. I mean, you know,
I'm not on the
is-
bureaucracy. I'm not. It's on process.
Well, okay, on the process, right? I mean, I think, you know, like so many things, the process is well-intentioned, and some of these things are steps that they may be frustrating to go through, but I think it is prudent to go through them to try to avoid unintended consequences. So my only point is, let's not make it all a, you know, government policy procedure, you know, we blow all that stuff away and just rush to judgment, because I don't think that's the right answer either. But it's an inertia problem, and that's the communication issue is how do we get people tuned into the fact that, you know, it's taken a while to get this thing up to speed.
Courtney?
Thank you. I agree that you guys are amazing in how much work we're doing. I did want to just comment, because of, you know, since we sit here and recommend changes to the plan later, and we go through all these projects, we have a lot of presentations that come to us, and we discuss a lot of what we're doing in the public, and, you know, and a lot of our discussions can be viewed on TV and so on. I think it's important for the public and people who are interested in the lagoon to understand that when we make changes to the plan, we do that with debate and discussion, and then it goes to the county commission, and I think the county commission puts a lot of weight in what we discuss. So I'm not interested in changing our plan based on a letter to the editor. I think that if people are willing to put effort into coming to us and attending these meetings and debate what they think we're doing is wrong or different, then they need to come here and do that. So we can have a discussion in front of the public instead of arguing in the Florida Today. So I just wanted to make that comment. Secondly, I wanted to ask you, Virginia, with the homeowner grant program, I think the idea of a loan is good, but I think it's really cumbersome to do all that when we could just pay the invoice. I mean, is there a reason why we can't just pay the invoice? I mean, are we doing that with the septic to sewer?
We continue to try to figure out if there is a way that we can just pay the invoice directly. That's challenging.
Is there a way that the city, like can the city of Satellite Beach intervene in that? Like, where we would be the grant recipient from the county, and we could do all that on our own? That might be a way to get the county out of it. Not that the county's bad, but you know what I mean? Like, you
To
have
be a
your
middleman.
ways of doing things. And
It would
and-
certainly be easier to front the money to another public organization than to individual homeowners. I mean, that's the other option, is can
Right.
we just front the money to the
Right.
homeowners? And,
Exactly.
you know, what sort of contracts would we need to be able to do it that way?
We would be willing to sit with the county to talk about how the city might be able to take that pressure off the county.
Thank you.
Because I know how hard it is for you all to keep track of every individual. I mean, the septic to sewer is one realm that we don't, you know, we can't help you with, but we can help you with this. So if that's something you all want to do, we'll be happy to be that conduit, if you will.
And I would note the city of Cocoa Beach has had the exact same discussion. I think what's probably needed is a model, a pilot, that can be templated, moved as a template to all the cities. And since the county owns a really big chunk of the places that, of grant recipients at the individual homeowner level. I think, I'd love to see a foot race between you guys and Satellite Beach to figure out, to see who can come up with a working program first. Because you're going to have to play in it, and you're going to have the greatest throughput volume.
If you'd like, I'd be willing to call Jim over at Cocoa Beach and we could, we'll set up a meeting, like a technical meeting, and just figure out how we can take the pressure off the county, because that needs to be done. If there's a septic to sewer conversion and stuff like that in any of these programs or in the city should be the direct recipient, so that you all don't have to manage every single project in the county. I mean, I think that's something that we all can step up to the plate on.
It also applies in living shoreline.
Yeah.
We're probably in October going to have a workshop in Cocoa Beach that brings in the planning board, which I chair, the sustainability committee. You haven't heard about this yet, Todd, but he chairs, probably land management, and see if we can't bring in not just MRC talking about living shoreline, but probably the zoo talking about oyster programs, and probably somebody from the county to talk about money and so on and so forth.
I mean, I see this list, and it boggles my mind how you all keep up with it. I really do. I mean, it's just amazing how much we're doing, and I think you all are doing a tremendous job. You know.
Okay. Virginia, what percentage of the septic to sewer currently planned is in county versus within a city? Do you know?
It's about 50-50, I think, and the part that's in cities, the majority of that is in Palm Bay.
Okay, so the cities we can probably that's half of it, and you can hand that off to them, but within the county you need to come up with some kind of a solution, and we probably have another year and a half at the current run rate that I'm seeing. Is that?
I hope we're going to get started hooking people up in Sykes Inn a lot faster than that.
Okay. 3 quick questions. The Kiwanis program, that's kind of a partial dredge. That's a Sykes Creek. That's not all of the original Merritt Island, right?
Correct.
Okay, and you're talking about a berm. These are going to be lined like we've done elsewhere?
I'm not, Walker, do you?
And do we have additional denitrification scheduled in there on the water? Same kind of process we're using in MIMS.
So we're working with the consulting engineering firm right now to define how the berms are going to be laid out. Lined or not lined, it looks like we're moving in the direction where we will leave that up to the contractor. The island is surrounded by the lagoon, so seepage is not as much of a concern in this area. But yes, we will still require the effluent scrubbing for nutrient reduction for the phosphorus and nitrogen.
Okay, I'll come back to you privately to find out more about that. Thank you. And,
Any other questions regarding?
Yeah, the second phase of that project, which is larger, is a fine site. Are we talking about the one in Rockledge, or is there a site in Merritt Island?
It's North Merritt Island.
Okay.
If we're talking about North Merritt Island dredging, is there any reconciliation for the concerns of the residents up there about where the muck goes? Because they had their hair on fire about 4 months ago.
Short answer to that is no.
Well,
Pressing on?
Well, I mean, we're not bulldozing through their concerns. This is a different area, and I think this particular area is not.
Yeah, so the area that they were concerned about was in the bottom of the bowl, in the middle of the floodplain. And so, that was the basis of their concerns. The Florida Inland Navigation Site, which is already permitted, it is already zoned appropriately for this use, and they're at about 90% design for permitting, is over next to the lagoon, and the outfall design will be in such a way that it will improve flood relief and drainage, not hamper it. So we've addressed what the folks said their concerns were about the original proposed site.
Can I make a comment real quick? I think this brings up an issue that I have, larger issue that I have countywide. while the concerns of the community, especially when it comes to having a spoil site and a dewatering site near them, or a demonstration project in their backyard, something that's close to them. And while we always want to look at their concerns and make sure that we address them, I think the community at large, and I think the county commission, I'd like, to encourage the county commission particularly and the staff, that while the concerns are important to address, we can't always address them sometimes. We have to look at the Indian River Lagoon restoration as the #1 priority. And while people might be uncomfortable for a year, or may have to address, deal with something personally for 6 months while a project's going on, they're going to have to do that. We have to do these projects. And while there is no perfect project, somebody's going to be impacted across the county at some point, at some time. And that's just life. So I have gotten so many calls, so many people wanting to do this or do that, and I actually say this. I'm like, do you want the lagoon restored? I mean, that's really the bottom line. We have to think that way. And yeah, you're going to be uncomfortable for a year. That's the way it's going to be. So I just want to make that comment that yes, their concerns are absolutely important, and we should always try to minimize the impact on the residents that are near it. But we have to do these projects. I mean, we just have to do them. So.
Okay, and I just had one more question, Virginia, and it's not regarding any of those sites, but I do want to come back on the Merritt Island later, if you don't mind. The zoo project that was just completed, that was the first one this year where they seeded or where they actually put in oysters? Do you remember because I can't find it in my...
Yeah, they used gardened oysters.
They used garden oysters, okay. So they haven't done any of these seeded projects yet?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Are we ready to move on?
Yes.
In the Mosquito
Great.
Lagoon?
Then I would invite Marty Wanielista?
Yeah, so Dr. Wanielista is
Wanielista.
with the
Thank you.
UCF Stormwater Academy, and he's been a driving force behind the use of natural microbial systems for nitrification, denitrification, and so we're really fortunate to have him here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. I've been at UCF for 48 years now, and my main area of study is stormwater management. I've been doing that for that long. I enjoy it, and particularly water quality analysis with stormwater. Also, of course, been active in the wastewater area, so wastewater, stormwater, water treatment too, and that like. But I've been fortunate to work with a lot of people, so I'm going to talk about some of our research and some of the results that I think are related to what we're talking about here today. And basically, I'm going to, in general, talk about what is nitrification. Denitrification, very general terms, but I've put in these slides a lot more information for those of you that want to get into more depth. I also going to talk about some of the BMPs that are used to manage nitrogen and how much nitrogen removal we get when we do these. Now, this is meant to be, in very basic terms, a tie back to what the nitrogen cycle is all about. And there's various forms of nitrogen within this cycle. And the thing that normally gives us difficulty is the so-called nitrate form, because it's available for plant and animal life. And we know that the nitrogen cycle is definitely needed for life. In very simple terms, nitrification is the making of nitrates by bacteria. And in other simple terms, denitrification is the process of making nitrogen gas using bacteria. All these require very special conditions for them to operate in. As an example, the nitrification process itself has a need for oxygen, whereas the denitrification process has a need for little oxygen, 0 or very, very low oxygen. It also requires a food source, and by food I mean the nitrate is a food, and so is ammonia. And so the whole system, to make it work, needs certain conditions to enhance the operation. The abundance of these organisms is there. I mean, they're ubiquitous, they're naturally occurring. They definitely need water or soil moisture, not necessarily saturated conditions, but a soil moisture condition in which they can operate in. So if these conditions, these basic conditions I just talked about are there, we can use nitrification and denitrification for stuff like nitrogen control from fertilizers, either in green roofs or in plants that are in areas and in grassed areas and so forth. And of course, we could also do the nitrification, denitrification cycle in the capture and conversion of the nitrogen forms into a nitrogen gas, which is then released to the atmosphere. So in one case, you can hold the nitrogen compounds that are needed for the plants, so the plants can use them. And in another case, you can convert that to nitrogen gas. And that is if you have these right conditions. And I'm just going to concentrate a little bit on the moisture concentration. You have to have moisture within the system. You have to have no toxic substances, and you cannot produce toxins either. I've examined over 50 different naturally occurring and recycled materials in our research, and some of them are toxic, especially at 100% usage. Others are non-toxic when you reduce the amount of composition. So if you use 5% of them or 10%, and you know, they're not toxic to the environment. But you have to make sure that any kind of enhancement that you're going to use for the bacteria to grow, you don't have toxic conditions which result from this. Also, you want to do something that has a long life expectancy. So you want to minimize this operating cost over a long period of time. And of course, when you get down to it, you want to look at the maintenance costs and so forth. One of the key factors is number 10 up there and on your list, which is contact time. You have to put this dissolved material in front of them, the bacteria, for a period of time. You just can't let it flow through really, really quickly, any kind of media. Simplified, if you had a plate of food, you can only consume a little bit of it in 1 minute, but if you had more time, you can consume the whole plate, right? Assuming it's something you like and so forth. And it's the same thing with this nitrogen bacteria, the nitrification bacteria and the denitrification bacteria. You got to give them enough time to eat. And that moisture content has to be there. Natural soils, which is the graph A there, has very little residual soil moisture content, whereas you can make a biosorption activated material which has a higher oxygen or a higher moisture content, and thus the bacteria have a greater chance of living in that environment and recovering very, very quickly. We usually look at a BAM mix that has a dry period of 30 days. In other words, the soil moisture will stay in there enough to support the bacteria for a quick recovery within 30, if it has a dry period of 30 days. Now, I've used the term biosorption activated media. It's simply a solid material which accumulates pollutants in a dissolved format and then turns those pollutants into some other form, such as a nitrogen gas through the denitrification process. It has to have a specific environment. Now, I said I've worked with over 50 of these in the past, and these are just some of the ones that are bold on the screen that we have extensive work with. I've also provided references of other people that have worked with these systems. All of them have certain qualities associated with them, and of course a cost associated with them, which has to be dealt with when you're deciding on what kind of a mix you want to use for a particular application. So I've listed all of these for your review. I've also wanted to mention some of those that we have used beyond the kinetics, and that kinetics just means removal. All of these have been known to remove pollutants, okay? And I've dealt with many of these ever since 1977. So we've had a long, extensive history. And these are systems in which we have a downflow application and also systems in which we have, I would say, extensive data to support the results, including a lot of toxicity testing. With some of the toxic results we have seen, they were caused by pesticides, which are commonly found. within some of the wood species, but it's also found in situations where in an aerobic condition, you find yourself actually producing ammonia, or the cycle reverses itself. We also had looked at iron filings and activated carbon and zeolite. That costly on the iron filing should be done at the zeolite, somehow just moved up there. But zeolite and activated carbon are costly, but still do a very good job. Why would newspaper be toxic, do you think? The discharge from newspaper? Well, it's the print. It's the ink. Okay, the ink becomes toxic. Compost, because of metals, it's hard to get a good compost that's free of metals, so they become toxic. Wonderful results with coconut coir. We continue to work with it and continue to use it. I work in the state of Washington and Oregon, where I'm using coconut coir out there because it's available from the islands, from the Pacific. It comes in right handily to them. It's still expensive for them, but the salmon industry means something to them, and we're taking out the pollutants which are harmful to the salmon industry. Peat, I had a hard time finding consistency with peat, especially with the organics in peat. And however, again, I'll say that all of these work. It's just that you have certain problematic areas, especially if you use it at 100% and find toxic results. I prefer a BAM material which is mineral, which means it exists for a long time, it doesn't decay, it doesn't have organics in it. I have typically used recycled tire, sand, clay, iron, and expanded clay. In all of these mixes, you don't have to use all these blends, but I've used at least 6 mixes in sites, and I'm going to talk about some of those as I show you the presentation today. One of the media we use is called the CTS media. It's basically sand, which allows that filtration. It has clay in it also. So these blends have been used. Recently, I started in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Texas with applications. Right now, we have a team out in California looking at some California applications. Within Florida, we have over 400,000 square feet of this stuff being used, and with good results. Turn my attention now to some examples on my left, or as I look at it, my left and the right side of the screen is a ground area on the left, in which has been planted with native vegetation, and below that is a BAM material that helps sequester or contain the nutrients as it goes through, and then the nutrients become available to the plants so the plants can continue to grow. On the right-hand side is the first, I guess, educational roof in the state of Florida. That's at UCF, using dune daisies that you can see quite obviously there, and other plants that we took a field trip to the coastline of on the East Coast over here, and found some good vegetation and some suppliers, and we're using that throughout the state. There's over 30 of those within, there's over 30 of those within the state of Florida, 30 green roofs in the state of Florida. And the one that's the largest is the Escambia County roof on their one-stop permit building. It's 33,000 square feet. And they've reduced their nitrogen down to an acceptable target level for discharge to the bay up there. There's all ways we can estimate what the efficiencies are. And this has to be a green roof. And I'm going to talk about the Florida Showcase Green EnviroHome in our backyard here in Brevard County. It's in Indian Atlantic. We found out that we can reduce the nitrogen coming off roofs by at least 80% or 70 to 80% if we use a cistern to recycle that material. And you can recycle that or reuse it back on the roofs, or you can reuse that water for irrigation purposes. You must use a BAM material, again, to sequester. And even at Florida Showcase Green EnviroHome, we use ozone as a disinfectant and other backup means, fully supported by the Department of Health, and we flush toilets there, and we wash clothes. I don't know if you ever smell clothes that have been washed with a high oxygen material. They smell good. They smell like the freshness after a lightning storm. It's after a rainstorm. It's that nice. Where is it located? Right off Ugali Causeway, down around Canal Street. And we were very fortunate to get involved with the builder there, Mark Baker, who was building this for his mom who lost her house in one of the hurricanes. The house has been operating now for 10 years, fully operational with BAM and recycled material. Here's a picture of the site, green roofs going in, the vegetation with bioswales. We had pervious pavers and pervious pavement. And on the right-hand side, those two tanks add up to about 4,500 gallons is the suggested size or the fill size for water that comes off the roof, and also water that is used in the house but not touching any kind of toilet operation. So you're talking about sink discharges. They all go into these tanks and then are reused in the house. That makes the house a black water house also, which means that the water that's coming from a cistern, from the cistern you have down the bottom here, right down here, see that little water cistern here, the water coming from that goes back in with some backup disinfection after ozone, washing clothes, then flushing toilets, and goes out for sewage treatment. They have an on-site sewage treatment facility. It also uses BAM. The water comes into a BAM mixture called Bold and Gold. It's an aerobic zone, so you have that. Aerobic means you're getting rid of the ammonia and organics into nitrate, and then in the anaerobic zone or the anoxic zone, the nitrates go to gas. So pretty simple. Passive too, by the way. Don't need any electricity. Okay, this is all working on a passive mode. And we sampled E1 port, which is input to this after the septic tank, output E4, and I'm just going to show you some of the results here. Interestingly enough, whenever before a certificate of occupancy, you have very little water going in the house except construction workers, which may have to use the facilities, the toilets, and so forth, okay? But you have very little water from the sinks and from the clothes washers and whatever else you may have water coming from in the house. But, you know, before occupancy, all you have is urine and fecal matter. So take a look at the nitrogen content. That nitrogen content should be down around 50 or so, 50 to 60. It's 390, okay? And that's because you're dealing with primarily urinated water, okay? But look at the removal we got from that, 98% is what the, that was before occupancy. After occupancy, the levels of nitrogen went down coming in as 128, and that's because they've reduced the water use so much, but the removal is still around 77%. This is at a 4.5-day retention time. Remember I told you it takes time, right? Whereas the one previous to that was at 13.5. So the bugs have a lot, that's days, okay? So they have a lot of time to eat, okay? Where now they have less time, okay? So you have less removal is occurring. Moisture content's there, the oxygen and non-oxygen conditions are also there. Switching attention to stormwater management. Here's a picture of a depression area in a public shopping center. A picture of a regional site, which you may find that's operated by a county or municipality. In the regional site, you have a pre-treatment that has BAM in it. You have also a flood control site. This happens to be a landlocked system, which means that there's no discharge from that. Everything goes into the ground. And you're saying, well, why do we protect the ground? Well, obviously, the groundwater has been known to carry some of the nitrogen, and it carries them to our springs, and it carries them to our estuaries, and you're well aware of that problem. But you do have opportunities for source control, you do have opportunities for regional controls, and by using a BAM, you can protect the groundwater. You can also protect surface water discharges from the BAM. We've had one site working since 1977. That site itself has sand and aluminized-based clay, which is the kind of clay that we've examined, also available within the state of Florida. The other site has been, the other site up in Marion County has been since 2011. Now, to further justify or to say that, hey, we really are finding this nitrification, denitrification process going on, we also have a gene machine or a DNA machine, so we can identify what little bacteria are there, those little buggers. Okay, so we can come in and actually measure to see if they're there. So we do have, and from a lot of the investigation, we have identified the DNA associated with the gene densities of the various type of bacteria that we're using. And this happens to be one from a stormwater system. Okay. Now I want to talk about another area too, to show you the wastewater application, because up in the land, they had a rib which was discharging excess reclaimed water. They did not want to take their existing facility to a denite solid plant, which had to have a large operating cost, but they wanted to use natural means. We then went ahead and converted one of their ribs with BAM on the bottom of it, 2 feet deep, so we just brought in the material. This is how you bring it in, big truckloads, or small bags if you wish. And this is a 1 acre site, so we brought in something like 120 truckloads of this stuff. And then just by bulldozers and so forth, just flattened it out on the bottom. So no special handling of this material. It's the bottom of a rib. And we did this in 4 days. The company that did this is ECS, Environmental Conservation Solutions. And they had trucks coming in there from about 7 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon, just bringing them in and spreading the material around. This is a little a diagram. It's called a box plot. All it says is that the red stuff is coming in. That's the nitrate coming in. It's gotten as high as 10. You don't see that point because it only goes up to 7. The average is about 3.6. And we had this NELAC certified labs, which means a lab which is other than the university, which is unbiased and also certified to do these kind of analysis. 73% of the time, the outlet samples were less than detection. Okay. 83% was the average annual removal using reclaimed water, and 95% was the average when we used stormwater in these facilities. Were the microorganisms there? Yes, this is another picture showing the denitrifying genes at 3 locations within within the rib that we were using. So we were again confident that this is being done, that we are getting the denitrification in this particular case. There's a lot of other measurements that go on too. We use all kinds of tracers and other types of water quality analysis to validate some of the structures, and all this has been published and peer-reviewed over time. I'd like to leave you with the idea that there are natural systems that work, and some of them don't even take any energy at all. You know, no electrical power needed. They work during hurricanes too, so you can still flush your toilet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right, these are naturally occurring organisms. Proper environments needed, and that's important because I've seen too many failures where people put something in the ground and all of a sudden it's supposed to have no oxygen, but it has all kinds of oxygen in there. We just finished a job for DOT up in Fanning Springs, and they put something in the ground, but yet it was oxygenated. It was wood chip that was oxygenated and actually created more nitrogen than they were putting out. The nitrogen underneath that area up there in Fanning Springs was 7 to 10 milligrams per liter. You know, 0.35 is usually the target level for nitrate going into a spring or an estuary. I don't know what it is in Indian River Lagoon, but I've been dealing with 0.35, and we've been able to meet that. You should go visit the Florida Showcase Green Enviro-Home. It's been in operation now for 8 years. We just measured the septic tank again and the drain field, and it's still working, only at 95% this time. We were getting at least 70 when we were there in 2010. In 2 feet of BAM used for stormwater or for reclaimed water treatment, those are the numbers we get. And we did identify biological activity within each of these systems. I thank you for the opportunity, and is it okay to ask if they want to ask questions and so forth? Yeah. John?
The Lagoon Trust Fund, which we oversee on this board, has got a very crude tool and a very crude metric. The tool is money, and we got lots of it. The metric is cost per pound of nitrogen removed or kept out of the river?
Right.
And is this cost effective? Is this something to run in around $1,000 per pound prevented or removed, et cetera? What's the dollar figure?
From the Fanning Springs job, we were asked to cost that out on a per pound basis using a 20-year cycle, and only using media, not the in-place facility. Fanning Spring was a ditch along the highway, so it wasn't very expensive. Just dig it up, put the stuff in the ground. So we're talking about somewhere around $3 to $4 a pound for the media itself. Now, the facility cost will increase quite a bit. If you talk about what's happening up at the land, we're talking more like $135 to $140 per pound removed. So the physical system you're putting it in is the major cost. Walgreens stores and Wawa stores have agreed to a contract with the supplier, and they're using, the Wawa stores are using green roofs, and they're using somewhere around $100 a pound removed over 20 years with a maintenance cycle of a replacement of plants. So they have the maintenance added into it for the replacement of plants. Remember, this is mineral, so you don't really have to replace it over time, unless you're interested in phosphorus. There's a limitation on phosphorus, but the more you use of it, the longer the time frame for phosphorus. I'm only talking about nitrogen now, John. Okay, so
Well,
that's that. Those are kind of numbers that we're dealing with that are validated by about all kinds of studies and work.
The only thing I can say back is wow. On our table.
It's a wow factor. Yeah, I mean it's. It takes years though to show the results of these things, and we've been trying for years to do that. And whenever people have to pay more money to do something, like 20 years ago, when I first came to Florida, and I worked in stormwater up north in Pennsylvania and Ohio River. When I first came here, they thought stormwater was very clean. Why are we doing it? And then I'm going to talk about removing nitrogen. I mean, you got to be crazy. Now there's a whole different philosophy and a whole different acceptance to this. So I think you guys are on the right track, and from what I hear, right?
Right now, we have no pilots to accommodate this approach. I think for patches of ground or in the Indian River Lagoon catchment basin, that this is it sounds like a very, very cost-effective way to deal with nitrogen, and there's two ways to approach it. One, we can hand out money. The other is there's a regulatory approach that says if you're putting in a basin, if you're building a development and have to have water catchment and so on, perhaps this could be a requirement. This is is fertile ground.
Let me just say.
And we can sequester that fertile.
So this is the basis of the cost per pound for stormwater projects that's in the plan, was using this technology. That's part of the frustration that we're getting from the community, is they're not used to this way of doing business. But that's why we've got that, roughly $100 per pound cost in there for stormwater. This is also the technology that we've got in the plan for septic upgrades, the passive performance systems. In the next update that we'll be bringing to you, we're looking at some of the latest work that he's done with the spray fields and RIB system for wastewater treatment plants, incorporating this into those facilities to reduce the loading to groundwater from those two.
So there were, I think I came away with two big things. Well, a whole lot, thank you, first off. And we've used BAM. I think, didn't we use it down in Long Point and other places? So there was a residential system that's being demonstrated here with no electricity, if my notes are right, getting a 71% reduction of nitrogen versus old septic tanks that got maybe 30%. Did I understand that right?
Correct.
So 71% could be a target for this county, or 70 versus 65, if anybody's listening. The second part, stormwater. So we're doing a stormwater, not stormwater, wastewater, reclaimed water programs in Palm Bay, Titusville, and one other place. Has this been considered, and would it be a lower cost than what we've, I mean, it was like $8 million, I think, down in Palm Bay, because the nitrogen that was coming out was like 14, and we need to get it down into the 7 range. Would this be a better way to do this? Maybe it's too late for that, but in the future? Is there ban in those projects?
I think so. Is there a ban planned in the wastewater remediation?
I'm not familiar with that level of detail in those projects.
You've never been stumped before. This is a first.
So they're dealing with a very large flow volume, and they have a small footprint. And so, you know, they will use the technology that they can fit into their footprint. And certainly, they use nitrification, denitrification in wastewater processes. I'm sure this is a part of it, but I don't know what else they may be doing to enhance that process on a small footprint.
Yeah, and that was, my question really led to gallons per day. I mean, you're talking about that 1 acre place that you filled a couple of feet thick, and if we're talking about the volume of water that comes out of any of these used, can it even handle this volume?
7 million gallons,
Yeah, millions of gallons.
So
Thank
was
you.
there
Can
an
be
answer
designed,
to
yeah.
the
Can be worked
powered
out.
septic tank?
No, the powered.
Yeah. Now, to John's first question, you mentioned your aerobic, anaerobic enhanced septic tank with no power. And we've seen numerous demonstrations of these, and they all require a pump, or seem to require a pump, which adds to the maintenance cost. So what's your secret, Doctor?
I guess when I don't know, it's just I don't think it's a secret. You mentioned it up here, just it's gravity flow through it, but I have to maintain those conditions that we've talked about, okay? The aerobic and anaerobic conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, it sounds like maybe it's something to do with slow flow rate, because John was opining that it may have something to do with, I think these systems we looked at had some degree of recirculation. They did.
Yeah, all the others that, not all the others, but most of the others that are on the market are recirculating systems of some sort, yeah. Or they add a chemical or something.
Well, we all know simple is better. I have one more quick one, and that is, if you could, at the risk of getting way in the weeds, so I understand that the denitrification is an anaerobic process. And can you tee that up against some of the pilots we've got going on that are looking at basically bubbling in the canals, you know, increasing the oxidation of the water column?
If the water column itself is one that has ammonia and organics in it, then bubbling, which adds oxygen, will help in the conversion. So it depends on the form that you have the nitrogen in. If the nitrogen is in the nitrate form, then it's not useful. Bubbling is aesthetic, or spraying is for aesthetic purposes. Now this goes back to wastewater treatment plants too, where the way they get nitrogen to the nitrate form is they have an on-off process where they add oxygen, and then they don't add oxygen, and they add oxygen, and then they don't add oxygen. I worked in that process when it was first developed. It's called the Burden of EcoSense process. It came out of South Africa. And that particular process basically works well. And again, it's using the organisms, the nitrification and the denitrification organisms. If you bubble stuff into water, you're adding oxygen, which is basically just not doing anything for the nitrate, but it's converting it to nitrate.
You had one more, I'm sorry.
David had a question first. Could we go to him, please?
Go ahead,
Thank
David.
you.
Sorry.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, John. Thank you, Dr. Wanielista, for being here today. It's very informative. I actually grew up as a child digging retention ponds. We never added anything to the bottom of them, which leads me to my question. Hoping you have some familiarity with Brevard County soils in the Lagoon watershed. how are those soils as a media, with the thousands of existing, retention ponds that we have in the county already that were just dug, that our stormwater flows into?
I had the opportunity to examine a few of them. Natural soils are heterogeneous, meaning that they change in composition so much. And in fact, you may have some clay veins or heavier concentrations of clay in some areas and more sandy in others. One site we looked at was very sandy, so the amount of oxygenation going on is very good because the oxygen can go through sand fairly quickly. And there's no residual soil moisture to speak of, so whenever you have more clay in it, you have the residual moisture content, which would hold the bacteria and have that right kind of bacteria available for you and actually enhance the denitrification case. In a general statement, sandy soils do nothing to remove nitrate. A more loamy-based soil will be very helpful. And in fact, at the land, we had a loamy-based soil, the best I could find in the state so far, and it's called Tavares soil, Tavares soil, for the removal of nitrate. And it removed about 30 to 40% of the nitrate. Now, that was good because we were measuring right underneath the Tavares soil, which had the consistency or the homogeneity of it. But the heterogeneity of the rest of the watershed was such that there was pockets of water going through too quickly. And that was quite obvious when you looked at the site. So what we've been promoting is get the bottom to be a consistent mix and that it's uniform across the bottom so that you get full treatment as you go through. I firmly believe that this non-homogeneity, after working in Ocala and the karst areas around Silver Springs, which, as you know the story of Silver Springs, and we're now working to remove nitrogen up there. But in many of the cases, the reason why they have sinkholes is this non-homogeneity. I mean, the water just goes through so quickly, it's going through so quickly, that's pulling everything with it, and it pulls it right down to the limestone and causes a sinkhole. So there's many more benefits associated with the use of a homogeneous bottom on these ponds.
Is that Tavares soil, is that anything that's ever been relocated or commercially made available?
Yes. You'll pay about the same as you would for BAM.
Oh.
Your cost is really in trucking. and people I talk to know this, okay? And so they want to drive the raw cost down. Or if you have some raw material, they drive it up so it's competitive in the marketplace. If that helps you. Now, Tavares soil, it's also non-homogeneous in the natural environment, so you won't get that homogeneity. And what drives the cost up is that you have to take it and you have to process it so that it becomes more like the same soil that you're asking for. That's the problem. And that's a screening operation, it's a separation operation. That takes a whole lot of time to do. And that drives, in fact, it tends to be even higher because the clay in the Tavares soil is sticky clay, and so it makes it hard to blend. Very difficult to blend.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
You had a photo of like a garden.
Are you speaking into the mic?
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Turn it on.
It was.
Was it?
Yeah. You had a photo of a garden, and underneath that garden was BAM.
Correct.
And it looked beautiful. How thick is that BAM? And is that used, I mean, is water, wastewater, or stormwater flows into that BAM, the garden sits on top? Is that how that's working?
On that garden, we had drain pipes coming from the roof of the homes, so it was roof drainage along with rainfall, and the thickness underneath there was 6 inches. So the number I gave you, $3 to $4, was for a 2-foot site. So for a 6-inch site, you'd be about one quarter of that cost, about $1.
So, and I'm not sure of the county regulations, but I know friends of mine that have been doing things around their home. They're trying to maintain all the water that falls on your property, on your roof, before it goes in. So there's drains being dug around people's yards and filled with things. If they use this BAM material, you would then have plants on and it would get natural nutrients from? I mean, it just seems like a win-win-win here.
Oh, it's a win-win situation. Yeah. We have not fertilized the roof on the UCF Student Union building, the green roof. We fertilized it the first 2 years But after that, we have not fertilized that. There's enough fertilizer up there. And same thing in Escambia County with their 33,000 square foot roof. They've never fertilized it.
And the material, the blue, what's it called, blue and? Gold and gold. Is that
Gold and gold.
is that like available to anybody, or is that only available to contractors, or anybody know?
Yeah, it's, and Tony, you'll sell to them, won't you? They'll even put it in a bag if you want it.
Is there a do-it-yourself capability
Yeah.
to the, typical homeowner?
Well, you buy the bag, no, the mix has to be very
No,
specific.
but I mean the,
Oh, the application?
Yeah.
No, you saw my pictures of the big trucks coming in and the city crew going around just flattening out. No, you just pour it, you put it in the ground, forget it. And it stays there. And it's non-toxic. And it's good. And it's not costly.
Where is the Florida Green Enviro home?
Florida Showcase Green Enviro Home is on Canal Street in India, Atlantic. So you take the U Galley Causeway across. And then as soon as I got to the first street, I turned right and went down a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's 160 Canal Street.
Are they self-guided tours, or do you?
Yeah. You want their phone number?
It'd be great for the
Can I?
the TV audience.
Okay. Public meeting, I understand. Now, Mark Baker and Nani Crystal own the home. Their mom still lives there with them. Great human interest story. A home that was considered could not be occupied after the hurricane. Was 2004? Is that it? 2004? Could not be occupied. And then you have Mark that went in there. He had tried over 100 different cost-saving ways of meeting environmental standards. Got the St. Johns River Water Management District's Best Water Conservation Award, and many other awards. So, okay. By the way, I'll call Mark right after this to make sure. Make sure he knows what's going on, okay? I don't know, I honestly don't know if they give tours anymore. Who asked for that? Did you ask? Okay, well, if you call them and say who you are.
Okay.
Can
And
I
that
make
you
a
heard this.
Can I make a recommendation? I
Yes.
would recommend that you all get together afterwards, and until you've talked with him, that you not
Yeah,
publish his
let's
number.
do that, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we do
And
wanna-
Tony told me that too
think
when I
it's
was
a-
coming up
I
here.
think it's a model way to encourage the public to
Oh,
see.
these people are wonderful. Unbelievable.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Antony Rios?
Are you going to get coffee?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Antony Rios. I'm an engineer with Environmental Conservation Solutions. We actually manufacture the Bolden Gold filtration media that Dr. Wanielista was alluding to. I'm actually a happy presenter today because normally I do this presentation and I have to cover both the technical side and the applications, but Dr. Wanielista has already gone through the nitty-gritty. So the applications part should just be smooth sailing from here. We're talking about all this because we are treating stormwater and wastewater in conventional ways. It's currently not working the way that we need it to, so we're improving these processes to address the concerns to our local waterways here. Officially today, I'm talking about using biosorption activated media to solve real-world problems in stormwater and wastewater applications. And we're going to discuss BAM in stormwater applications using existing projects. That's easy to do here in Florida. Biosorption activated media is being used all over the place in dry basins, exfiltration trenches, things like that. We will also discuss using biosorption activated media on the wastewater side of things. It's a little harder to find projects on that because BAM isn't as accepted by the regulatory agencies for wastewater as it is on the stormwater side of things. And then at the end, we'll get into some questions. So first, when we're talking about stormwater design, there's two design thought processes that you can go through. First is the conventional designs that we're very used to seeing. It's the stormwater ponds, the wet detention ponds, the roadside swales, things like that. Very common. And then there's also the low impact development theory. And really that's a newer type of mindset that says we want to get the same treatment or better treatment than the conventional design, but we want to do it in a smaller footprint. Some examples of that low-impact development are the bioretention cells that Dr. Wanielista was speaking about, rain gardens, permeable pavers, things like that. There are additional tools in the toolbox for both conventional and low-impact design, but since we only have 15 minutes, we're going to focus on these 6 that we have up here. First, we're going to talk about the wet and dry ponds. In Florida, we typically see these dry ponds or infiltration bases all around as we're driving around. On the top left, you see the general schematic for an infiltration basin, really just a large depression in the ground, and the water infiltrates through the native soils there and gets a certain treatment. So the way that we're able to modify these basins or upgrade them is we remove the top 2-foot layer of soil, we put in the biosorption activated media, and now you have a new and improved modified basin. The schematic on the bottom right shows exactly just that. The dark black area there is the biosorption activated media or the Bolden Gold. That's how you would put it in the design there. These are 2 examples of a dry pond that we did. The one on the left there is in Silver Springs, Marion County. And that is actually just a retrofit of an infiltration basin, an existing one. They scooped out a 2-foot layer, between 1 and 2-foot layer from the top and just put in the Bolden Gold there, put in some fill materials, sod, and they were good to go, move on to the next one. The picture on the right, very similar application, same process. When it comes to wet pond design and using BAM, it's a little bit different because wet ponds don't work exactly the same as dry ponds to where they infiltrate down in the bottom. The wet ponds, they usually go out through an overflow structure and out to your receiving water body or to your next treatment. So we had to come up with an innovative way to treat the water for a wet pond. So what we've done, these next 2 slides, is research projects that we're doing in North Carolina. And in your wet pond, you have your permanent pool volume, and any additional rain that comes in is going to increase the level of that permanent pool. So as that level increases, it overflows onto the biosorption activated media bed you see there, and it will flow through, and that water that overflows will get treated by the biosorption activated media. So that's what you see there in this slide here. This next one is another wet pond that we have in North Carolina. Same exact design. In that middle picture there, you can actually see that the water has overflowed and gone over our Bolden Gold filter. And through those 2 sampling ports there, we'll be able to pull samples and make sure that that filter is doing what it was designed to do. And then hopefully this is just a pilot project, so right now it's only on one side of the pond, but once they get good results from there, hopefully we can make it go around the whole perimeter of the pond and then treat more of the water as it overflows. Next we'll move on to the roadside swales. You see those as you're driving down the highways, the vegetative filter strips, things like that, very common here in Florida. The science behind this is exactly the same as the dry ponds or the dry infiltration basins. As the water infiltrates through that first layer there, it gets treated. So we do the same thing. We just scoop out that top little layer of soil there, put in some biosorption activated media, and now you have a system that does improved treatment compared to your regular swale. And I guess you'd call that a bioswale with the biosorption activated media in there. This, I wanted to put this project on here because this is actually the linear ditch that Dr. Wanielista was just talking about in Fanning Springs. And the unique thing about this is that the picture on the bottom right is the finished product. So it works very similar to a swale, whereas when it rains, the water hits that top surface there, infiltrates through, and gets treated by the BAM that's underneath. What makes this unique is that you see the picture with the wood chip there? This was actually a side-by-side comparison where we used BAM on one side of that ditch and then compared it to wood chip treatment to see which one is going to do better. But in the picture with the wood chip there, you see the drip irrigation tubing. So what that does is there's a pump that actually goes down into the groundwater. So at times of dry period when it's not raining and it's not doing its regular treatment, that pump will kick on, take water from the ground and disperse it over that ditch and treat the groundwater as well. So while all the other swales are being lazy, this guy keeps working 24 hours a day, or while that pump kicks on. The picture on the top left is the lysimeter buckets that we use. It's down beneath the Bolden Gold, so you can actually capture the water there and see what kind of removal you get for that application. Treatment vault systems are baffle boxes. Those are normally at the beginning of your stormwater treatment plant. And typically they're just used to remove gross pollutants, your debris, your leaves, sticks, things like that. They get captured in that grate in the top left, and then the suspended solids will fall down to the bottom. That's just your typical baffle box. What designers have done, SunTree Technologies in particular, they partnered with us, and they have a patent for their own baffle box, which you see up there. And down at the end, the right chamber, that's where they put a little cage that has BAM inside of it. So the picture on the bottom right is a zoomed in vision of that cage, and the water flows down underneath and upflows through the media, providing that additional treatment. So you hear a lot of times they call that a second generation baffle box. It's a baffle box that just has BAM incorporated into it. They have a ton of those here in Florida. This is actually one in Cocoa Beach. I'm pretty sure that's Minuteman Causeway over there. But this is one of the SunTree Technologies projects that they've done. I'm going to move on and talk about the low-impact development side of things a little bit, bioretention cells, rain gardens, things like that. To kind of answer your question a little bit, sir, or go farther into that about the depth of the bioretention cells, here, for bigger ones, for an actual cell as opposed to a rain garden, the depth can go all the way down to 30 inches for this one. So we have about a 30-inch depth of biosorption activated media. In a conventional bioretention cell, you would still have that top wood chip layer to provide the material for the plants to grow, and underneath you would just have native soil. So all we've done is we've removed the sandy soil or the native soil, put in the biosorption activated media, and now you have an advanced bioretention cell. Some examples of projects that have been done. The picture all the way on the left is a boat ramp over in Tampa. It's a bioretention cell or rain garden there, and the Bolden Gold is underneath. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see the curb and there's a little cut in there. So what happens is the stormwater that runs off of the street in the parking lot goes into that little cut, and that's how the rain garden gets fed, and then down into the treatment media. The picture in the middle and the right are also the Minuteman Causeway projects. Those are rain gardens, bioretention cells. Really, it's the same technology. I guess rain gardens are just a little bit smaller than a bioretention cell, so that's just the difference between the two. The picture in the middle there is kind of like a 2-for-1. I use that one because not only do we have the biosorption activated media in the rain garden there, but it is also beneath the permeable pavers. So that's another LID option that you can use. As the water hits that sidewalk there, instead of running off and going to one treatment application, it actually goes through the pavers, hits the biosorption activated media underneath there, and gets treated before it goes to your next treatment process. So you're actually able to put them in a train or combine them to get additional treatment or better treatment than you would with just your conventional methods there. We can also use green roofs with biosorption activated media. The diagram on the left shows the general schematic. You have your vegetation on the top, and then you have a growth layer on the bottom or just underneath that. The way that we've improved that is by adding a pollution control layer just below that growth layer. So what happens is, in a conventional green roof, that growth layer will provide food for the vegetation, and any nutrients that isn't absorbed by the plants will normally go in your effluent out to your next treatment phase. Well, the pollution control media underneath that will capture that extra nutrients and prevent it from going to the next stage. So once again, we're just improving what is currently being used now for the LID development. As Dr. Wanielista was saying, Wawa has contracted to use a lot of Bold and Gold or biosorption activated media for their green roofs. That's the most recent one that we've done. The picture on the left is up there because that's actually how we get the media up onto the roof. We put it into those super sacks. It's a 2,000-pound bag, and it'll get hoisted up by a crane onto the roof. And it's very hard to see in that picture, but there's dark brown just below the bag there, and that is the biosorption activated media on the floor there already. Hard to see though. All right, I'm going to shift gears, talk a little bit about wastewater applications and how we're trying to use BAM on the wastewater side of things. Here in Florida, the health department has actually just made strides and put out a new rule allowing biosorption activated media beneath the conventional drain field that we have. Also, I'm going to talk a little bit about the rapid infiltration basin at DeLand that from the wastewater treatment plant that reduces the nutrients in their effluent. And then we'll talk about complete denitrification units that are available out on the market. They're just not very popular because they are expensive and they are energy intensive. The Florida Department of Health, they are allowing the biosorption activated media now beneath their drain fields. The picture on the left is actually what they have approved. You have your conventional drain field area, whether you're using rock and pipe, chambers, anything like that. And then you have an 18-inch layer of sand, which will perform denitrification. And then beneath that, you have your denitrification layer. Right now, currently, as the health department has it written, the only thing that we're allowed to put down there in that denitrification media is a wood chip and sand mix that they have approved. You cannot put Bold and Gold or any other type of engineered media in there currently. We are talking with the DOH right now, trying to figure out how we can use our media in their same configuration. But as of maybe 2 weeks ago when I talked to the health department, they don't have any installed projects right now of this configuration going on, so it's going to be interesting to see what kind of results they get, how they install it, all that kind of good stuff.
So it's this.
The system on the right is something that the health department has in mind. It has the same processes as their passive system on the left, which is it goes from the septic tank to a stage 1 nitrification tank and then a stage 2 denitrification tank out to your drain field. Where the BAM comes into play on the in-tank passive nitrogen system is that stage 2 biofilter. That biofilter is where you would put in the BAM or the Bold and Gold or your wood chip and sand, whatever it is that you're going to keep in that anaerobic condition for that certain amount of time to get that denitrification to occur.
Yeah, I can find the meeting, but I can't find the slides.
Pictures look familiar? This is installation pictures of the DeLand rib that Dr. Wanielista was speaking about. The picture on the bottom right there just kind of shows the soil profile. You see a 2-foot layer there of BAM, which is the light gold on top, and then the dark brown on the bottom is the natural native soils there that has that clay in there that Dr. Wanielista was speaking about. So that's why you see the difference in colors there. Another picture of the rib, it actually shows the 1-acre site split in two. On the right, on the top right, that has a little bit of water in there. That's the side with the Bold and Gold media. The lysimeter locations are just sampling ports where we pull samples to make sure that the rib is doing what it's supposed to do. And the bottom picture there, I put in there because that's actually after the hurricane when both of those basins filled up with about 5 to 6 foot of water. 12? Oh, it went all the way up to 12. So interesting to see. We probably had to take a few month break to wait for all that to drain down before we could pull samples again. And that's a whole nother fun story for us.
First quarter starts in October.
Finally, we'll talk about complete denitrification units on the wastewater side of things. These are approved for use in wastewater here. You can install them now if you wanted to, but again, they are expensive, they are energy intensive, and that's why everybody is looking for a passive way to try to do these, to try to do this treatment. These systems, they do have reactive media in there. The bottom one has a coconut core, EcoFlow, and then the top one, I think that's just a foam type of material that they use as their media substrate. But either way, it's just a full package plant. It's a one-stop shop. Some of them even act as a septic tank as well, so it'll take the raw wastewater and then has the next chamber where your nitrification can occur. Most likely, it's kind of like an aerobic treatment unit where they have some sort of bubble diffuser in there, and then it'll go to the next chamber where the denitrification occurs in the media, and then finally out into the drain field. But really, that is where we're at as far as the technology for BAM and wastewater applications here in Florida. Anything else?
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Your Bold and Gold product, is there a life expectancy for that, or is that a permanent installation wherever it's used?
So it depends. If you're talking about nitrification, as long as you keep the environment right, those bugs will keep on eating, keep on working as long as you keep them happy. When it comes to phosphorus load, depending on your concentration of phosphorus coming in, phosphorus binds to the media, so it takes up available spaces on there. So once all those parking spaces are taken up, they can't park there anymore. So at that point, you would need to either replace the media or rejuvenate the media.
And these, the images you showed of the municipal projects where your media is being used, and those swales and stuff, is that written into the code in those municipalities, or are the planning people at those cities just making conscious environmental decisions to use it?
Dr. Wanielista might be able to answer this a little better, but as far as stormwater is concerned, there are written rules in there stating the type of media that you can use for stormwater projects. It talks about the particle distribution size, what it should be made of, all these different kind of things. But yes, somewhere out there, there is a rule book that tells you what you can use.
Okay.
And you also have to make discharge, the net improvement, post-spray conditions.
Okay.
The media helps you get
Okay, thank you.
It's really a question for Virginia. We find ourselves buying baffle boxes for communities in the county. Can we or do we require BAM in the baffle boxes? Can we insist on a certain design that takes advantage of this technology?
We, as a part of the plan, we don't require it, but if you use a BAM, then you're going to get higher nutrient removal, and so you're going to get a higher cost share.
And this is a
So
dialogue on projects?
there's a financial incentive to go there, but it's not a requirement.
And to expand on that, Virginia, what about, I know like bioswales are now a requirement anytime we're, building a new seawall or replacing a seawall. I see it seems like this would be a perfect fit. Fill has to be brought in these projects. Quite often, seawalls can be abandoned in place. A new seawall can be put 12 inches out in front of it. There's a big gap right there. Soil has to be brought in. It seems to me, why couldn't that be, a BAM product instead of just, dirt?
I will talk to the permitting staff.
So when they're following up on that, a truck is usually 16 to 18 yards of dirt. So what does 16 yards of BAM cost? Roughly.
That is a great question.
Don't you sell it?
Right. And
Now, give me a retail price. I'm not asking for, volume. Just roughly, what's a truckload cost?
Jeff.
Yeah.
But the reality is that you're not going to need as much because you're not completely filling it in. You're only putting, a 6-inch layer. So it's not like all the dirt that you would be using to go into that site needs to be BAM. It
Okay.
only needs to be a layer.
Okay, good point. What's a yard cost?
Right. And, to be fully honest with you, I am a design engineer and I design a lot of these projects. And the general manager of our company, he's the one that works out all of the pricing and how much it costs per truckload and everything like that.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe this is more to Virginia, but we have a lot of roads that were built in this county in the 60s and 70s during development that are relatively close to bodies of water, and most of them have ditches along them. Would there be an application for this kind of product in those ditches? And the other part is it has to be about the bugs. The bugs have to live in this. It's not just the material, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so even if we were just to be putting it in, we've got to maintain an environment where the bugs do their stuff. So it's not as simple as me going, I'm going to throw it in my backyard and it's going to work, right? Do I understand that correctly?
Sometimes it is that easy. The environment, the important environment is that anaerobic environment for denitrification. So as long as if you install it deep enough, oxygen won't get down into the ground, and that can create your anaerobic environment. If you keep it completely saturated all the time, that can create your anaerobic environment. So there's a few different techniques that you can use to make sure that you provide that anaerobic environment for those bugs. It's all just site specific.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I've been asked to take a 10-minute recess, so we will do so. We will be back at 10:22.